Alright, very good morning, everybody. Let me just see if we are live or not. Let me confirm if we are live. Just give me a moment. Mm, yes, we're live. Alright, so, yeah, allow me to quickly take you through an introduction of the Unacademy portal, the Unacademy platform, before we begin with the questions for the day. So, Unacademy is perhaps India's largest learning platform today when it comes to any kind of test preparation, any kind of competitive exam preparation. This YouTube channel is particularly for your management exams such as your CAT, GMAT, NMAT, ZAT, MAT, SNAP, and the likes. I am Prankur Arora. I am going to be your instructor on this journey of learning, wherein I'll be taking you through an introduction when I'll be taking you through all the concepts pertaining to the verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of these exams. Right. I've been in the learning industry for a better part of the last couple of years. I'm a trainer. I'm a coach. I've consulted with companies such as in Interglobe, Marico, Becton Dickinson, and the likes. I'm also a published author. Wrote this book called "It's Not Funny." Garnered quite a lot of critical acclaim. Positive reviews from the likes of Papa CJ and Biswapati Sarkar. I hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization called Leadership Management International as well. And I co founded the startup by the name of Thought Sutra. So, yeah, that's pretty much about me. Welcome aboard this journey of learning. As mentioned, I'll be essentially taking over, presiding over the concepts pertaining to the verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of these exams. So there are quite a lot of features that add to the Unacademy advantage. There are the features such as giving you access to daily live classes, wherein all interaction between the educator as well as the learners happens in real time. You can ask your questions, you can clear your doubts. Even the question answers, they're conducted in a very interesting format of polls, right? Um, we conduct regular tests and quizzes to help you evaluate your performance as well. Where you lie versus where you want to be in your preparation journey. So all that is kind of taken care of. Plus, all the courses on the platform are pretty much structured, very much in line with the exam syllabus to help you get the best of everything. And with one subscription to the platform, you get unlimited access to all kinds of resources. So we've got quite a lot of educators on the platform. All of these educators are highly credible people, right? And over the years, they've mentored many aspirants into various top tier management institutions, be it your IIMs, MDIs, XLRIs, ISBs, you name it, they've cracked it. And you can start learning for free from all these educators before deciding whether you want to enroll and avail the key benefits of subscription or not. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live. Language is never a barrier either. We've got educators that teach in vernacular languages as well. A really cool thing is that you design your own schedule. You decide what are the kind of courses you want to enroll into, who are the educators you want to be learning from, right? And a very important thing is that throughout this class you'll see that I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on the class notes. So all these class notes with the educator annotations, they're made available to you once you subscribe to the platform. Talking of subscription, these are the various subscription models. You can clearly see that as the time period of the subscription goes up, the cost of the subscription per month goes down dramatically, right? So if you're preparing for next year, I would recommend uh, that you subscribe for at least a 6 month or a 12-month journey, right? Having said that, if you use my name Prankur, you will get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you go for, right? So yeah, let's begin with the first question for the day. This is a question from Zat. I think it was 2016 Zat that this question featured in. Read the following poem and answer the question that follows. So this is the poem and this is the question. I sought a soul in the sea and found a coral there. Beneath the foam for me an ocean was all laid bare. Into my heart's night along a narrow way I groped, and lo, the light and infinite land of day. Let's look at the questions. Which of the following would best describe the essence of the poem above? What lies outside is always deceptive. Pursue the narrow path and avoid the broad ways. This is clearly out of scope. Nothing. See, we can what we can gauge from the poem. What we can gauge from the poem here is that the author, the author wants to convey that if we search within, we'll find all the answers, right? So, for example, I sought a soul in the sea, right? And found a coral there, right? I was searching for my soul and I found a coral. Beneath the foam, an ocean was laid bare. So, beneath the foam of the ocean on the surface, right? So this is all a metaphor, this is all an imagery for how we can find the truth, we can find ourselves, we can find our reality if we search within, if we introspect, right? So, using the analogy of the oceans and even the author's own hearts, the author is reiterating the same point again and again, right? So therefore option B though is definitely out of scope, and option A kind of uh, it is too extreme. When you say what lies outside is always deceptive, it is too extreme, right? So I would not really go for that either. um, Now we are left with options C, D, and E. External search is futile. Explore the inner space for answers. That kind of makes sense. That is something the author is referring to. Heart's pathways are broad and clear to find the destination. Again, there's no mention of destination here. Eliminate option D. Light offers sight and insight. Nope. There's no idea of along a narrow way I groped, and lo, the light and infinite land of day. Right? So, light is mentioned as something that you kind of come across once you're looking within. Right? So, that light is kind of, the metaphor here for positivity. Light is kind of the metaphor here for how when you look within, you'll find all the answers. There's no darkness there. Right? So, C in that context looks the most appropriate answer option. Let's move on to the next question now. Which of the following is analogous to the statement above? Right, let's look at the sentence now. Assumptions are analogous to the basic ingredients in a gourmet recipe. Only the final product of the recipe dictates whether the ingredients suffice. Which of the following is analogous to the statement above? Right, let's look at the options. Good wine needs no advertisement. The apple never falls far from the tree. All is well that ends well. As you sow, so shall you reap. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Right. Um, See, it can kind of be inferred from the given line that the that assumptions are analogous to ingredients in a recipe, right? Assumptions, they are kind of analogous to the ingredients in the recipe, right? Only the when you say only the final product of the recipe dictates whether the ingredients suffice. So what we are trying to get at is that only the taste of the food can tell us whether the ingredients were appropriate or not, right? That is what the line kind of is getting at. What is that is what the author is trying to get at. And therefore option E in this context, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, makes the maximum amount of sense. It is the most relevant, right? That when you once you eat the food, that is when you will figure out whether the ingredients were appropriate or the ingredients were not appropriate, stuff like that, right? So proof of the pudding is in the eating makes the maximum amount of sense. Let's look at the next question. This is a Parajumbles question, clearly. Okay, let's look at all the sentences. The first and the last sentences are given to us. Suppose I know someone Smith. If we had a fair amount of evidence he was killed, I would try to make you say that you're being credulous. Uh, One day you come to me and say Smith is in Cambridge. I inquire and find you stood at Guildhall and saw at the other end a man and said that was Smith. I'd say, listen, this isn't sufficient evidence. I've heard that he has been killed in a battle in this war. Right. So, statement S is I've heard that he has been killed in a battle in the war is kind of connected to statement 1 because the author provides information about Smith. Suppose I know someone Smith. I've heard, I've heard that he has been killed in a battle in this war, right? So when the author is saying that, the author is kind of letting us know, or the author is providing information about Smith and his knowledge about him. Suppose I know someone, so statement 1 and statement S will follow one obviously. Suppose I know someone, Smith. I've heard that he has been killed in a battle in this war, right? After this, inquire in statement Q. I inquire I inquire and find you stood at Guildhall and saw at the other end a man and said that was Smith. Right? So inquire here refers to the fact mentioned in statement P. Right? So Q should ideally follow P. One day you come to me and say Smith is in Cambridge. Uh, I inquire. So Q will follow this. I inquire and find you stood at Guildhall and saw at the other end a man and said that was Smith. Right? And evidence mentioned in statement R. I'd say, listen, this isn't sufficient evidence, right? So, evidence mentioned here refers to the argument mentioned in statement Q, right? This isn't sufficient evidence. What isn't sufficient evidence? This. You stood at Guildhall and saw at the other end a man and said that was Smith, right? So, R should ideally follow Q, right? When we say this isn't sufficient evidence, what are we trying to get at, or what are we referring to? Right? So SPQR is perhaps the most appropriate arrangement here, right? And therefore, the most appropriate arrangement, and therefore one, or rather option A, 1 SPQR6 is perhaps the best answer in this question, right? So 1 SPQR6. This is the best arrangement. So answer option A. So again, we have the same pattern. We have sentence 1 and sentence 6. And out, we have to figure out the arrangement of PQRS. Right. I hope you would have solved it by now. Let's quickly look at the solution here. Right. The word symmetry is used here with a special meaning and therefore needs to be defined. Um, for instance, if we look at a vase that is left and right symmetrical, then turn it 180 around the vertical axis, it looks the same. When we have a picture symmetrical, one side is somehow the same as the other side. When is a thing symmetrical? How can we define it? Professor Herman Weil has given this definition of symmetry. A thing is symmetrical if one can subject it to a certain operation and it appears exactly the same after operation. We shall adopt the definition of symmetry in Weil's more general form, and in that form we shall discuss symmetry of physical laws. Right. So, what we essentially are trying to get at here is that we are talking about symmetry and how we can define symmetry. So, the first statement after one, the word symmetry is used here with a special meaning and therefore needs to be defined. So, we start with statement R, which says, when is a thing symmetrical? How can we define it? So, we start with that question. And Q, we can clearly see, is kind of answering that question, that when we have the picture symmetrical, one side is somehow the same as the other side. S defines it further. Professor Herman Weil has given this definition of symmetry. A thing is symmetrical if one can subject it to a certain operation and it appears exactly the same after operation. After S, we'll have obviously statement P, which is kind of developing on it with an example. For instance, if we look at a vase that is left and right symmetrical, then turn it 180 around the vertical axis, it looks the same, right? And obviously, then we have statement 6, which with which we conclude we shall adopt the definition of symmetry in Weil's more general form, and in that form we shall discuss symmetry of physical laws. So, answer option D seems the most viable in this scenario. Let's look at another question. From the passage above, choose the correct option. Right, let's look at it. The most successful coaches in India in Indian club football tournaments are from Latin American countries. In most of the Latin American countries, football is more popular sport than cricket. So, what is it that the author is trying to get at here? When you look at it, what is it that the author is trying to get at? See, there is uh, let's look at all the options, right? The most successful coaches in Indian club football tournaments are from Latin American countries. In most of the Latin American countries, football is more popular than cricket. Let's look at answer option A. It can be definitely concluded, again, it can be definitely concluded that in India, cricket is more popular than football. Uh, in the passage, though, there is no mention of popularity of cricket in India, so we can definitely eliminate option A. Option B. It can be definitely concluded that most Latin American countries are successful at football. Um, See, it is given that football is popular in Latin America, but we cannot conclude that football is also successful there, right? So we'll eliminate option B in that context. Option C. It can be definitely concluded that in recent past, coaches of Indian football teams are not from Latin America. See, the paragraph gives information about coaches of Indian club football teams, right? So we cannot infer option C either. Option D, it can be definitely concluded that European football coaches are less successful than their Latin American counterparts for Indian national team. Again, option D is out of scope because there is no discussion about European football coaches. So we eliminate option D. Option E seems like the most viable and it is like the only remaining option also. It cannot be definitely concluded that the more popular a sport, the better the chance of producing a successful coach in that sport. See, option E is kind of true because the expertise of a coach and the popularity of that sport in their country cannot be established based on just the information that we are given in the passage, right? So to be able to conclude on that, we need a lot more information, and that is why I'll go with option E, right? So let me just tick mark it and let's move on to the next question now. Again, it is an inference question. Which of the following is true? Okay, let's look at the question now. Statement 1 says that offices and positions for the marginalized sections should be open to those with greater savings among them. And statement 2 says offices and positions must be open to everyone based on the principle of fair opportunity, right? So supporting equal opportunity does not offices and positions for the marginalized should be open to those with greater savings. Offices and positions must be open to everyone based on the principle of fair opportunity. So let's draw an inference and let's look at all the. Sorry, what just happened? Apologies for this. Yeah, right. So let's look at all the options one by one. Right. Option A, statement 1 assumes that the marginalized sections are capable of savings. So option A is kind of irrelevant because statement 1 does not really assume that marginalized sections of society are incapable of saving, or they depend on subsidies. That is not something that they are assuming. Offices and positions for the marginalized should be open to those with greater savings among them, right? So supporting uh, so the idea that it assumes that the marginalized sections are incapable of saving, that is something that is totally false, because they're assuming that they are also capable of saving, and that is why we are saying it should be open to those with greater savings among them, right? So A is kind of uh, relevant there. Statement 2 mentions fair opportunity, right, as a principle, but it never really suggests that everyone is exposed to it, right? So, statement 2 assumes that all citizens are equally exposed to all opportunities. That is not something that they are saying, so we can eliminate B. Statement C says it contradicts meritocracy. uh, so, supporting equal opportunity does not necessarily contradict meritocracy, right? We are saying we can afford equal opportunity. That does not mean that we are contradicting meritocracy. So, we can eliminate option C as well. D says statement 2 assumes that all citizens are equally intelligent. Um, it does assume that everyone deserves equal opportunity, right? It does assume that, and going by that and saying that it assumes that all citizens are equally intelligent. See, the idea there is that, so offices and positions must be open to everyone based on the principles of fair opportunity. So, if we say that it assumes that all citizens are equally intelligent or equally capable, that is why it is justified to open the offices and positions to everybody, right? Otherwise, why will we open the offices and positions to everybody, right? So that is why I think D kind of makes sense. And when we look at E, statement 1 assumes that the marginalized section are always dependent on subsidies. Not really. We talked about how it is not assuming that they are incapable of saving or always dependent on subsidies. So we'll eliminate E as well. The only option that kind of looks viable in this scenario is option 2, or rather statement D, which is drawing an inference on option 2, right? Let's look at another question. This is a sentence elimination question now. Museums are not neutral spaces where objects exist without context. They do more than allow us to engage with history and art. They are forms in and of themselves which, to varying degrees, enable and propagate missions and legacies through design and architecture. Try as some museums might to go unnoticed as simply the pedestal or wall on which history and artwork hangs, there is no escaping the weight of the objects and stories told within their architecture. A museum of modern art in Cologne isn't so different from a museum of modern art in Chicago. You can see the same major canon artists arranged in more or less the same. So, what is it that we can kind of infer from the sentences that are given us here? The meaning that they're trying to basically touch upon is that how museums, even they tell us a lot of stuff about design, a lot of stuff about history and art through their own design and architecture. What they're trying to get at, look at this, right? Try as some museums might to go unnoticed as simply the pedestal or the wall on which history and art hangs, there is no escaping the weight of the objects and stories told within their architect. So what they're saying is that, even though when we go to museums we look at the artworks and the sculptures that kind of hang there, but it is not just that. When you look at the design and the architecture of the museum itself, the building itself, right, it also tells us a lot about history and art, right? And then you look at sentence say that museums are not neutral, where objects exist without context. They do more than allow us to engage with history and art. They are forms in and of themselves. Uh, and they tell us a lot about legacies through their own design and architecture. So we are trying to basically stress upon the importance of the building, of the design, of the architecture of the museums also, not just the art that is found within the museums, right? And then you have option D, which kind of contradicts all of this by saying that a museum in Cologne isn't different from a museum in Chicago. A, B, and C are talking about the uniqueness and the idea of the design and architecture of these museums, telling us a lot. And then statement D is kind of negating all that by saying that a museum in Cologne is the same as a museum in Chicago. You see same major canon artists arranged in more or less the same way. Whereas A, B, and C is basically trying to stress upon the uniqueness of every building of a museum, right? So D in that context becomes the odd one out. Let's look at the next question. It is a Parajumbles question. Hate speech is characterized by a deliberate targeting of communities rather than beliefs. What the management must seek to do is to not let political discussions and debates to descend into vituperative attacks and hate speech, but such an association. What association are we talking about, or what association are we referring to? But such an association will be spurious, as questioning orthodoxy and conservatism is not tantamount to hate speech. The student body's activism has been criticized by detractors, and it has been sought to be associated with it. So, this association is clearly a reference to the association that sentence D is ironing out, that activism has been characterized as association with hate speech, right? But such an association. So, we can say for a fact that C will follow D, right? And that is given to us in only two options. So we'll straight away eliminate 1 and 2, because we know for a fact that the association that sentence C is referring to is the one that is mentioned in D, right? But such an association will be spurious, as questioning orthodoxy and conservatism is not tantamount to hate speech. What is hate speech then, or what is tantamount to hate speech? That sentence is kind of telling us that hate speech is characterized by a deliberate targeting of communities rather than beliefs, right? So DCA is a big link. And then we end with sentence B as the conclusion, because it says what the management must do to resolve this idea, to resolve this problem. So DCAB is the best arrangement, and therefore option 4 is the correct option. Let's move on to the next question. This is a reasoning question now. Which of the following, if true, most strongly supports Summit's explanation of its success in retaining employees? Right, let's look at it now. Most employees in the computer industry move from company to company, changing jobs several times in their careers. However, Summit Computers is known throughout the industry for retaining its employees. Summit credits its success in retaining employees to its informal, non hierarchical work environment. Which of the following, if true, most strongly supports Summit's explanation for of its success in retaining employees? So, what is the premise and what is the question asking you for? The premise is that they are saying that in computers, in the software, in the computer industry, employees, they move from company to company, changing jobs a lot of times. But then there is one company, which is the Summit Computers. It is known for retaining its employees, right? And Summit says that the reason behind this success is the informal, non hierarchical work environment that Summit Computers has, right? So we have to basically strengthen this argument. We have to support Summit's explanation. Let's look at all the options and follow the process of elimination here. Option A says some people employed in the computer industry, they change jobs if they become bored with their current projects. They change job if they get bored with their current projects. How is the boredom linked to the non-hierarchical informal work environment? It is kind of not. There is no way to kind of here, credit Summit's explanation, right? So we eliminate option A. Option B says a hierarchical work environment hinders the cooperative exchange of ideas that computer industry employees consider necessary for their work. A very interesting proposition here, that a hierarchical work environment, it hinders the cooperative exchange of ideas that computer industry employees consider necessary for their work. Right. So here we are telling us what can be the bottleneck when we have a hierarchical work environment, that the exchange of ideas is not very cooperative there, and uh, employees think that it hinders the work environment. So B kind of is in tandem with the explanation that Summit Computers gave us. C tells us many of Summit Serum's employees had worked at only one other computer company. Right. So does not really give, see, does not develop on why they are sticking at Summit now. Even if they've worked at only one company before, this does not really support the explanation. This does not tell us, why they are sticking at Summit, right? So, historical ideas of whether they worked at only one company or 10 companies does not really tell us anything. We eliminate option C. D. In a non hierarchical work environment, people avoid behavior that might threaten group harmony and thus avoid discussing with their colleagues any dissatisfaction they might have with their jobs. Again, they only stop discussing with their colleagues. That does not mean they might not be dissatisfied with their jobs. Only telling us that they don't discuss it does not really mean that they're not dissatisfied anymore, right? So we eliminate option D as well. uh, Option B seems the most likely and very much in tandem with Summit's explanation, because they're again telling us why a hierarchical work environment is not necessary or is not very essential to the computer industry, where exchange of ideas needs an informal environment, a non hierarchical environment. So B is very much in line with Summit's explanation. So B is the answer option that strengthens the explanation. Let's move on to another question, a Parajumbles question again. Right, it's been a couple of minutes. I hope you would have solved your question by now. Comments have the potential to turn a news website into a democratic polyphony. What is a democratic polyphony? It can become a site for multiple concurrent debates. What does it refer to? It refers to a news website. It can become a site for multiple concurrent debates, for registering dissent, for pursuing an idea, and finally for building a polity of informed choices. So A and C are very much linked there, where C will follow A. right? Because C is defining what a democratic polyphony is. And then we have B, which says, but a contrasting sentiment. Now you have to switch the sentiment, right? But there is also a danger of it descending to cacophony if readers do not express opinions in a language that behooves the requirements of a matured public sphere, right? And then we conclude with D, right? That the role of the moderators is to retain the space for polyphony and reject voices that breed cacophony. So ACBD in that context becomes the best possible arrangement. ACBD option 4. Next question. A more vital, dynamic, and inclusive form of democracy is generated as the risk of corruption reduces, election fever abates, and attention to the common good increases, as those who've been drafted are exposed to expert opinion. When is a more vital, dynamic, inclusive form of democracy created? That is something that we should look for when it comes to the passage, when it comes to figuring out the parajumbles. As those who've been drafted are exposed to expert opinion, objective information, and public debate, voting is not simply based on gut feel but careful deliberation. All right. Renaissance states such as Venice and Florence experienced centuries of political stability by practicing democracy on the basis of sortition or drafting by a lot. Here you are defining sortition with sortition. So this is a keyword again. We know for a fact C and D are linked. With sortition, everybody does not vote on an issue, if you understand, but a random sample of the population is drafted to come to grips with the problem in order to take a sensible decision. So CD are a link where D will follow C, right? Plus here when we say a random sample of the population is drafted, right? B was saying as those who've been drafted. So DB are also a link where B will follow D. Whereas those who've been drafted are exposed to expert opinion, objective information, and public debate. Voting is not simply based on gut feel but careful deliberation. So CD and DB are a link. CD, but DB is not a link here. DB is a link, but CD is no link. Here they are a link, and here it is DC instead of CD. So we eliminate option 4. Option 3 is the most viable option with sentence A. featuring as the concluding statement that a more dynamic, inclusive form of democracy is generated as the risk of corruption reduces, election fever abates, and attention to the common good increases. Another Parajumbles question. For years, the singles competition was judged according to two categories. Okay, what are the two categories though? Secondly, the compulsory. So, secondly will come after firstly, obviously. So, B will follow D, right? Um, Figure skating is primarily a sport of amateurs. Contests are held for singles and for pairs. For years, the singles competition was judged according to two categories. So we know for a fact that we are talking about figure skating. So C will be the first statement, obviously. Uh, and we are saying it is held for singles and for pairs. And after that, we will have A, where we saying for years the singles competition was judged according to two categories. What is the first category? Firstly, the free skating category judged a skater's ability to perform jumps, spins, spirals, and skating coordinated with music. Then we'll have B, which is secondly the compulsory figure skate category. Required each skater to perform 3 or 6 repetitions of three figures drawn from a possible 41 patterns. And finally, we'll have E. All figures are based on a figure 8 pattern or variations thereof. So CADBE is the most viable arrangement in this context. Option B. Yeah, hope you've understood this. Let's move on to the next question. This is again which of the following option best summarizes the main idea of the paragraph? This is again a reasoning question. You have to summarize the main idea. Okay. I trust that you've been able to figure out your answer by now. Let's look at what the premise, what the situation in this paragraph is, right? Uh, Oklahoma is not perceived as overpopulated because, in spite of a horrendous drought, it is not facing famine. Famine in Oklahoma is inconceivable because it receives a fair price for its exports. It has not leased its land to foreign countries. The poorest of the poor receive a helping hand from the government, and farmers and ranchers receive federal assistance in times of droughts. It is a lack of these factors in Horn of Africa, plus political insecurity in Somalia, which explain the famine, not overpopulation. So, what are we trying to get at here? We are talking about Oklahoma, and we are saying that famine in Oklahoma is not possible. It is inconceivable. Why is it inconceivable? Because then it gives us reasons here that it receives fair price of its exports. It has not leased its land to foreign countries. Poorest of the poor receive a helping hand from the government, and farmers and ranchers receive federal assistance in the times of droughts. Then we are saying that it is a lack of these factors in Africa plus the political insecurity in Somalia that explain famine, not overpopulation. So we are drawing an analogy. Our premise is based on Oklahoma, and then we are drawing an analogy from there and saying that this is why in the Horn of Africa, overpopulation does not cause drought. A lack of these factors plus political situation of Somalia causes droughts. Right. So we have to summarize this idea of the paragraph. Let's look at all the four options that we have and follow the process of elimination. Option A: hunger is caused by too many people pressing against finite resources. Instead, the argument or the paragraph is hinting at the opposite, right? That hunger is caused by something else. It is not caused by too many people pressing against finite resources, right? We are saying overpopulation is not the cause of famine. Option B: in spite of drought and overpopulation, there is no famine in Oklahoma. That is not the main idea of the paragraph. That is like the first part of the premise. So we'll eliminate option B as well. C: overpopulation and famine are not causally related in the Horn of Africa. Definitely makes sense. We are saying overpopulation does not cause famine. It is something else that causes famine. Right? Let's look at D. Famine in the Horn of Africa is not only due to overpopulation, but more importantly, due to the lack of government assistance and political insecurity. Now, they are using the correlative not only but also. Whenever we say not only X, we are saying X is also a reason. But we know for a fact that overpopulation is not the reason according to the paragraph, according to the author. Right? So, not only nahi hona chahiye tha, khali not hona chahiye tha, then I would have gone with this. But right now I cannot go with this because not only the usage of not only means that I am listing overpopulation as a reason as well. Whereas overpopulation is definitely not the reason, right? So C makes better sense than D, right? Hope you've understood this. Let's move on to the next question. Choose the correct sentence. Alright, let's look at this. Neither the king nor his ministers desires war. So whenever we have a neither X nor Y construction, right? The verb has to be in tandem with Y. That is the rule of the subject verb agreement when we are using the neither nor construction, right? So since Y is ministers, this is plural, right? Whereas when we look at the verb desires is singular, right? It should be desire, not desires, right? So therefore we eliminate option 1. We eliminate option 2 as well, right? Neither the king nor his ministers desire war. This is plural, this is also plural, so 3 makes sense. Fourth, neither king nor his ministers desire war. Now, this is alright, but we are referring to a specific king here. We're not referring to kings or a group of kings. We are saying a specific king, that neither the king nor his ministers, right? We are using the pronoun his. So we are referring to a specific king, and that is why we need the we need the to be inserted in sentence 4 for it to be grammatically correct, right? So therefore we'll eliminate 4 as well. The only option that is making sense is option 3 or sentence 3. Again, choose the correct sentence. Gopal and Ramesh have not finished his work. Gopal and Ramesh has not finished his work. Neither Gopal nor Ramesh have finished their work, and neither Gopal nor Ramesh has finished his work. It's a very interesting question. Right. Gopal and Ramesh Gopal and Ramesh have not finished. This should have been their work, right? Gopal and Ramesh means that we have a plural subject, right? So have matches the plurality, but the pronoun needs to be plural as well. Gopal and Ramesh, this is has, it should be have. So eliminate options 1 and 2. Neither Gopal nor Ramesh. So in the previous question itself, I mentioned how whenever we have a neither nor construction, the verb has to be in tandem with the nor component or the Y component. This is Ramesh. This is singular. This needs to be singular as well if we are using the neither nor construction. And then again, pronoun needs to be singular too. So eliminate option 3. Option 4, neither Gopal nor Ramesh. Ramesh is singular, so verb is also singular, pronoun is also singular. So the fourth option makes the maximum amount of sense. Choose the incorrect part. All right. I trust you've been able to solve it. Contrary to popular belief, business plans do not generate business financing. All right. True, there are many kinds of financing options that require a business plan, but nobody invests in a business plan. After being turned down by VCs, we needed money to invest in our business, so we are selling our home. Now, the idea is when you look at the last sentence, this is past tense, right? We needed money to invest in our business, so we are selling our home is present continuous, right? Either turn the both of them into past tense or have the both of them in the present tense. We needed money to invest in our business, so we sold our home, right? Makes sense. Or we need money to invest in our business, so we are selling our home. Either the both of these verbs should be in the past tense or the both of them should be in present tense for there to be uniformity, right? So the incorrect part is part 4. A sentence correction question now. Responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles, the interiors of the newest models are so luxurious that they sell for nearly twice the price of last year's models. Responding to growing demand for high-end vehicles. Who is responding to this growing demand? Right? That is a question we need to answer. Who is responding to this growing demand? That is something we need right after the comma here. Right? What makes sense is that the automakers will respond to this growing demand. Interiors cannot respond to the growing demand. Interiors are non-living things. Automakers, uh, and then we have to choose from between options C and D. Automakers have installed interiors in the newest models that are so luxurious that they sell. Automakers have installed interiors in the newest models that are so luxurious that they sell. This they is kind of ambiguous. What does this they refer to? They refers to the models, or they refers to the interiors, or they refers to the automakers. Right? What does this they refer to? Right? So we eliminate option C. Automakers have installed such luxurious interiors in the newest models that these cars sell. Right? So there's no ambiguous pronoun in this case. So D, option D is the most viable answer option. Another sentence correction question. Because of the sharp increases in the price of gold and silver, the value of Monica Taylor's portfolio rose as her daughter-in-law's dropped. So this is a comparison question. Try to solve it and I'll explain it in about 60 seconds. Right. So what are we comparing here? Are we comparing two portfolios or are we comparing the value of the portfolio? The value of Monica Taylor's portfolio rose as her daughter-in-law's dropped. What does daughter-in-laws refer to? Daughter-in-laws refers to the portfolio, but we need to refer to the value of her portfolio, right? So again, option A is as her daughter-in-laws dropped. This is again only a reference to the portfolio. So we eliminate option A. Option B, while her daughter-in-laws has dropped. Again, her daughter-in-laws means that we are referring to the portfolio, but we need to be referring to the value, right? So we eliminate option B as well. C, as there was a drop in her daughter-in-laws. Again, this is a reference to only the portfolio. This is a reference to only the portfolio, but we need to be referring to the value, so we eliminate option C. D, while that of her daughter-in-laws dropped, that here refers to the value, daughter-in-laws refers to the portfolio, so D is an amazing answer option. as it dropped from for her daughter-in-laws. Again, it refers to what? Has it dropped for her daughter-in-laws? It refers to what? Right? Since there's that confusion, we'll eliminate option E. Also, we need while, right? While means that we are drawing a contrast. As is not a contrast conjunction. While is the contrast conjunction. uh, but is a contrast conjunction, whereas is a contrast conjunction. as से कोई contrasting sentiment नहीं निकल कर आता, so we eliminate option E. D is the best answer option in this scenario. Let's move on to the next question. Five sentences related to a topic are given below in a jumbled order. Four of them form a coherent and unified paragraph. Identify the odd sentence that does not go with the four. Key in the number of the option that you choose. So, this is a sentence elimination or an odd one out question. Right, let's try to figure this out. Let's look at all the sentences one by one. Stat signaled something measurable while Matic advertised free labor, but Tron above all indicated control. So we have these terms that we probably need a reference for. It was a totem of high modernism. What does it refer to? The intellectual and cultural mode that decreed no process or phenomenon was too complex to be grasped, managed, and optimized. Um, Like the heraldic shields of ancient knights, these morphemes were painted onto the name. These refers to what? Right? Were painted onto the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friends and enemies alike. Okay. The historian Robert Proctor at Stanford University calls the suffix tron along with matic and stat embodied symbols. Okay, so we have a reference. 1 and 4 are linked. 5. To gain the suffix, again there is a mention of the suffix, was to acquire a proud and optimistic emblem of the electronic and atomic age. So 1, 4, 5, these are clearly linked. Um, Now it is out of sentences 2 and 3 that we need to figure out which one goes and which one does not. 3 says these were emblems, right? Painted onto the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friends and enemies alike. Proud and optimistic emblem of the electronic and atomic age. So, sentence 3 is kind of referring to or developing on what sentence 5 was saying. that, to gain the suffix was to acquire a proud and optimistic emblem. Right? Like the heraldic sheets of ancient knights, these morphemes were painted onto the names of scientific technologies to proclaim one's history and achievements to friend and family. So these were proud symbols, these were proud emblems. So 3 is also kind of going with 1, 4, 5, but sentence 2 seems to be the odd one out because it is not really referring to the suffix or the emblems or anything. It was a totem of high modernism, intellectual, cultural mode that decreed no process or phenomenon was too complex to be grasped, managed, and optimized. Again, this is a very vague sentence, not really referring to the suffix or the emblems at all. Right, so we do away with option 2. Let's begin with the reading comprehension now. Okay, I trust that you would have read this paragraph by now. Oh, when I was little, children were bought two kinds of ice cream sold from those white wagons with canopies made of silvery metal, either the 2-cent cone or the 4-cent ice cream pie. The 2-cent cone was very small, in fact, it could fit comfortably into a child's hand. And it was made by taking the ice cream from its container with a special scoop and piling it on the cone. Granny always suggested I eat only a part of the cone, then throw away the pointed end because it had been touched by the vendor's hand. Though that was the best part, nice and crunchy, and it was regularly eaten in secret after a pretense of discarding it. So, what is this paragraph getting at? The subject of this paragraph is that the author is trying to recall something from his childhood, something from his past that was kind of intriguing to him, which is that his grandmother suggested something that he only eat a part of the cone and throw away the pointed part because it had been touched by the vendor's hand. So, for hygienic reasons, his grandmother suggested something. Let's move on to paragraph 2. Right, the 4-cent pie was made by a special little machine, also silvery, which pressed two discs of sweet biscuit against the cylindrical section of ice cream. First, you had to thrust your tongue into the gap between the biscuits until it touched the central nucleus of ice cream. Then gradually you ate the whole thing, the biscuit surfaces softening as they become soaked in creamy nectar. Granny had no advice to give here. In theory, the pies had been touched only by the machine. In practice, the vendor had held them in his hand while giving them to us, but it was impossible to isolate the contaminated heat. So here the author is trying to rationalize grandmother's advice by saying that when it came to this biscuit, right, this was a 4-cent biscuit. uh, the logic did not apply here for some reason. The advice that his grandmother gave him here for the 2-cent cone did not really kind of apply here when it came to the 4-cent pie. Why is that? Right, so the author is kind of amused by this. Let's look at the next paragraph. I was fascinated, however, by some of my peers whose parents bought them not a 4-cent pie but two 2-cent cones. These privileged children advanced proudly with one cone in their right hand and one in their left, and expertly moving their head from side to side. They licked first one, then the other. This liturgy seemed to me so sumptuously enviable that many times I asked to be allowed to celebrate it in vain. My elders were inflexible. A 4-cent ice, yes, but two 2-cent cone ones? Absolutely no. So here the author is trying to develop on that experience about how he could see his friends carrying two 2-cent cones, but you know essentially no 1-cent cone, no 4-cent ice cream, no 4-cent ice cream. The or rather the author and then goes on to say how the author envied all this, right? The author was enviable about all this. Let's move on to paragraph 4 and see what that envy essentially hinted at. As anyone can see, neither mathematics nor economy nor dietetics justified this refusal, nor did hygiene, assuming that in due course the tips of both cones were discarded. The pathetic and obviously mendacious justification was that a boy, concerned with turning his eyes from one cone to the other, was more inclined to stumble over stones, steps, or cracks in the pavement. I dimly sense that there was another secret justification, cruelly pedagogical, but I was unable to grasp it. Right. So the author is developing on that experience of his about how his parents and the elders, other elders, kind of, they did not really, they health and hygiene was no justification, plus mathematics also did not justify it, because all the author wanted was that instead of the 4-cent biscuit, the author gets two 2-cent cones, right? So the mathematics does not justify it, the hygiene just does not justify it. So the author is like, obviously I dimly sense that there was another secret justification, cruelly pedagogical, but I was unable to grasp it. Look at this, right? So the author says he was not at that point in time, was unable to grasp the justification or the reason. Right. So the last concluding paragraph says, today's citizen and victim of a consumer society, a civilization of excess and waste, uh, which the societies of the 30s was not. I realize that those dear and now departed elders were right. Two 2-cent cones instead of one at 4 cents did not signify squandering, economically speaking, but symbolically they surely did. It was for this precise reason that I yearned for them, because two ice creams suggested access, and this was precisely why they were denied to me, because they looked indecent, an insult to poverty, a display of fictitious privilege, a boast of wealth. Only spoiled children. Uh, Ate two cones at once, those children who in fairy tales were rightly punished, as Pinocchio was when he rejected the skin and the stalk. And parents who encourage this weakness appropriate to little pavness were bringing up their children in the foolish theater of I'd like to but I can't. They were preparing them to turn up at tourist class check-in with a fake Gucci bag bought from a street peddler on the beach at Rimini. So here the author is kind of making sense or rationalizing the experience of his childhood by saying what it really signified or stood for. Sorry, this is the concluding paragraph. Right. Nowadays, the moralist risks seeming at odds with morality in a world where the consumer civilization now wants even adults to be spoiled and promises them always something more. From the wristwatch in the box of detergent to the bonus bangle sheath with a magazine it accompanies in a plastic envelope. Like the parents of those ambidextrous gluttons I so envied, the consumer civilization pretends to give more but actually gives for 4 cents what is worth 4 cents. You will throw away the old transistor radio to purchase the new one that boasts an alarm clock as well, but some inexplicable defect in the mechanism will guarantee that the radio lasts only a year. The new cheap car will have leather seats, double side mirrors adjustable from side and a panel dashboard, but it will not last nearly so long as the glorious old Fiat 500, which even when it broke down could be started again with a kick. The morality of the old days made Spartans of us all, while today's morality wants us all to be Sybarites. Question 1. Which of the following cannot be inferred from the passage? Cannot being the operative word here. Today's society is more extravagant than the society of 1930s. This can be inferred, yes. Citizen and victim of a civilization of excess and waste, which the societies of the 30s was not. Right? This can be inferred. The act of eating two ice cream cones is akin to a ceremonial process. Right? It can also be inferred. Elders rightly suggested that a boy turning ice from one cone to the other was more likely to fall. Elders rightly suggested this cannot be inferred, right? It is kind of an excuse that the author knows for a fact that his elders gave. The consumer civilization attempts to spoil children and adults alike. This can also be inferred, right? Now wants even adults to be spoiled. Option C cannot be inferred as something that was true from the passage. Yes. So sorry, I needed to tick mark it. Yeah, this cannot be inferred. The author pined for two 2-cent cones instead of one 4-cent pie because it made dietetic sense. Nope. It suggested intemperance. Perhaps, yes. It was more fun. Don't know this for a fact. He was a glutton. No, the author was not a glutton. It had visual appeal. No. It suggested intemperance, right? It suggested excess, and the author wanted excess. Intemperance means excess. So B is the most viable answer option here. What does the author mean by nowadays the moralists risk seeming at odds with morality? The risks associated with immorality have gone up? Not really. Consumerism is amoral? No, the author does not say that consumerism is amoral. The concept of morality has changed over the years. Kind of, yes. Nowadays, the moralist risks seeming at odds with morality because the author is saying that the morality of the yesteryears is not the morality of today. The morality has changed. Moralists of yesterday have become immoral today, not at all. So, B is the better of the lot. According to the author, the justification for refusal to let him eat two cones was plausibly didactic, dietetic, dialectic, diatonic, diastolic. Dietetic, it was not related to diet. Dialectic, no, it was not dialectical mechanism. Was it diatonic? Diatonic suggests something pertaining to tone, not really. Diastolic, don't know the meaning, so I won't go ahead with this. Didactic is something that the author kind of hinted at, right? Um, right. Look at this. Paragraph 4. I dimly sense that there was another secret justification, cruelly pedagogical. Pedagogical means that there it was an instructional thing. Those were the instructions. And that is what makes sense. Didactic also means some a place where you're given instructions. Somewhere you're given instructions. So didactic makes the maximum amount of sense. So option A here looks like the most feasible in the lot, right? So with this, we've come to the end of today's class. You guys, thank you so much for joining in. We've solved quite a lot of questions today. Hope this practice helps you and that you keep up with the practice. I'll be back again very, very soon with another set of questions curated especially for you. Till then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay mellow.